Hello and welcome back. Once again, I'm your instructor, Lukas, and today we'll be discussing questioning. The utility of questions is often underappreciated by students who are used to seeing questions mostly in the context of tests and homework, but after this, you'll see them in a new light. Many students may be surprised to learn that researchers suggest that the most effective learning technique of all is asking and answering questions. But it makes sense. Curiosity is one of the foundations of learning. After all, scientists often begin by asking a question, like why something happens, and then proceed to developing theories and a hypothesis and testing it to discover the answers. Asking questions is the basis for scholarly research in many, many fields. In fact, the very first step of the scientific method is to ask a question. This question defines both what research will be necessary as well as what objectives will be addressed by the study or the paper. There are many different ways to classify questions depending on your purpose. One common division people are often aware of is the difference between close-ended questions, which can only be answered with yes or no, and open-ended questions, which require more information. However, this is far from the only type. Another example would be lower-order questions like, what color is a zebra? That asks you to identify information versus higher-order questions like, why is a zebra that color? A low-order question is one that requires you to simply recall a single fact, while a high-order question will require that a student understand the relationship between a fact or piece of knowledge within the greater context of the situation. However, those were merely examples. Questions are an essential tool for gaining a deeper understanding of what you're reading, and the types of questions we're going to be looking at are designed for use when reading or discussing literature. The first level are factual questions based directly on stated information. You might think of them as on the lines. The second level are inferential questions, where directly stated information is combined with previous knowledge and experience to infer the answers. You might think of this type as between the lines. The third type, evaluation questions, ask about the reader's opinions regarding the larger issues or real-world applications of things the book discusses. These beyond the lines type of questions ask you to evaluate or apply the material. Let's look more closely at each of these three types with examples from the novel we're reading, the Da Vinci Code. Factual or literal questions are, as stated on the last slide, based on directly stated information, on the lines. These are the most straightforward types of question that require only knowledge of the text. Factual questions are right there. They require you to only find or remember the spot in the text where the information that answers the question is provided. You can physically point at the answer and say, it's right there. On more difficult questions of this type, the information may be scattered. These questions often ask about obvious information that's repeated or key details that are very important to the text's point or plot and helps move it forward. Some examples of factual questions are, what is Robert Langdon's job? What questions did Teabing ask before letting Langdon and Sophie in the gate of his house? What kind of watch did Vernay the bank manager wear? Some types of factual questions include basic stated information, identifying frequently stated information which presents some condition critical to the story. So examples might be, who are the two main characters? Who was after them? Key detail, identifying a detail or details that appear at some key juncture of the plot and bear a cause and effect relationship to what happens. Some examples might be, what does Sophie tell Langdon when he meets her in the bathroom at the Louvre? Or stated relationship, identifying a statement which explains the relationship between two key pieces of information. One example might be, what does the P.S. in Saunier's message mean to Sophie? Inferential questions, sometimes called interpretive questions, are a bit more complicated. These questions are between the lines. They are about things that are merely implied or about interpretations. They are more think and search types of questions. The reader must search for the various details or information related to the question and then think about the nature of the connection between the details. If details are few, close together and have a more obvious relationship, the question is easier to answer. If details are more numerous, farther apart, and are less obviously related, the question is more difficult. The reader must operate on the text to create interpretations and explore unstated relationships. These questions explain relationships. How are two things related? The answers to inferential questions are found both in the text and within readers who interpret it. Answering this type of question involves both knowing the text as well as drawing from your own experiences and knowledge to understand how things fit together or what is being hinted at. This might require a reader to fill in gaps in the text with their own background knowledge, or to elaborate or extend the text in a way that's reasonable based on your own experiences as well as what the text states. You combine personal resources with information provided by the author. For example, asking what the questions that Teabing asks Robert and Sophie before allowing them onto the estate show about his character is an inferential question. You not only need to know what the questions were, you also need to combine that with your own knowledge and experience of people to decide what it means about his personality. Some types of inferential questions include a simple implied relationship, which is inferring the relationship between two pieces of information, usually closely situated in the text. This relationship is not explicitly stated, but is implied by the stated information. An example would be, why does Aringa Rosa want the keystone? A complex implied relationship involves inferring the relationships among many pieces of information spread throughout large parts of the text. A question of this type may concern the causes of a character change or a change in situation. This would involve relating details of personality or situation before and after the change, and inferring the causes of the change from those same details or events. Some examples are, how and why does Sophie's attitude toward family change from the beginning to the end of the story? Or, what can we tell about Saunier from his actions in the first chapter? Evaluation questions, sometimes called judgment questions, are a bit different from the other two. Evaluation questions are beyond the lines, questions that evaluate and apply the material. The questions usually include a claim about the world and potential meanings and actions within the world. Answering this type of question doesn't always involve textual information from the specific reading, although having read the text might have inspired the question or may somehow assist in answering it. You can often tentatively answer this type of question apart from the reading, although the reading might help you address it. Answers are found within a reader who weighs what is being said against their own experiences. Questions might begin with agree or disagree, explain why or why not, asking what if, what is best or worse, to critique or evaluate actions, characters, or themes. Some types of evaluation questions include author's generalization, inferring a generalization about the world outside of the work from the fabric of the text as a whole. These questions demand a statement of what the work suggests about human condition as it exists outside the text. Some examples might be, what comment or generalization does the story make about the importance of history, of art, symbolism, knowledge, religion? Structural generalization is generalizing about how parts of the work operate together to achieve certain effects. This type of question first requires the reader to generalize about the arrangement of certain parts in the work. Second, it requires an explanation about how those parts work to achieve certain effects. This encourages students to explicitly explain how the structure of a text works to create a central meaning. An example would be, Dan Brown says that Silas is the most sympathetic character in the book. Is that true? Evaluation is, obviously, evaluating, critiquing, or judging aspects of the work. Questions of this type may ask whether someone's actions are justified, whether the reader agrees or disagrees with the values, actions, or judgments of the characters or the overall message of the book, how important the issues raised in the text are, what should be done about them, how readers are supposed to think or act afterwards, what the text leaves out or omits, and more. An example is, does Dan Brown give compelling evidence of the theory that Jesus was married? And finally, judgment. This judges whether the author's message or implication is true from your experiences, values, and knowledge of the world. An example might be, should all knowledge be revealed or available, or should some knowledge be limited to a select few? The question types can work together. Asking and answering factual, on-the-lines questions can help to answer inferential, between-the-lines questions, which can help to formulate and answer the critical, beyond-the-lines questions. For example, fact: what clues to Saunier's death does Fash have? Inference: why does Fash think Robert did it? What contributes to his hasty conclusion? Evaluation: is Fash's conclusion that Robert is guilty justified, given what he knows and his situation? Each of these questions builds on the previous one, and each informs and helps to suggest the next one. Each type of question relates to how or where you will find the question: in the text, in your understanding of the text using your background knowledge, or in your knowledge of the world. The three levels of questioning focus first on the text by itself, factual, then on your understanding and extension of the text, interpretation, inferences, and then finally on your opinions and your knowledge of life and the world, critical, evaluative. You may not know what kind of question something was until you had read the text and could say whether or not the information was explicitly stated. Inferential and evaluative questions, levels 2 and 3, are great discussion questions since different readers may have different interpretations, which can lead to thought-provoking and interesting discussions. These are the type of questions you'll be focusing on in this course. One thing to consider when trying to write questions for discussion is the difference between open-ended and close-ended questions. A close-ended question has a single answer that is short, a word or phrase. An open-ended question is just that, open. There might be several possible answers, and it's not possible to answer the question with a yes or no or a simple statement. As you may guess, questions with one correct short answer are not good for stimulating discussions. Factual questions are the most common type of closed-ended questions, so you should avoid those in forming your discussion questions. Therefore, your questions should be inferential, level 2, or evaluative, level 3. Some question stems to inspire you are provided here. You might ask, why? Why did a character act the way they did? What does a character want? What is their motivation for a particular action? Why did an action happen the way it did? What does a particular action show about a character? What would happen or would have happened if? What are the differences between this and that? How are this and that similar? How does one thing affect another? What are the strengths and weaknesses of something? What's the meaning of a particular symbol? Thank you for watching. I hope that this overview was helpful and illuminating and has given you a new insight into the utility of questions. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions you may have about the material. I'm always happy to help.